The last episode of the Re-Zero light novel probably brought the battle with the biggest power scale in the whole novel so far, not counting Reinhard. After all, the enemy was someone who, so to speak, had 100% magical resistance and 100% physical resistance at all times. The only way to defeat him was by taking advantage of a small opening he had in his body. Basically, this episode is about how the best mage in history, the strongest mage currently, and the strongest dragon man of the present will do their best to oppose the strongest creature in history. But before continuing with the video, let me briefly thank Shura and Guillermo Rios. I don't know these people very well, but it is a great gesture all the same that they are paying for the membership right now when I only upload videos for members. Meanwhile, on my English channel, I welcome Hannon Hawks. I'm glad you enjoyed my latest video, and also a special mention to KYCP who claims he likes the cut content format. Many thanks. Welcome to the analysis and recap of Chapter 49 of Arc 9 of the Re-Zero light novel. The episode starts where we left off. While Ezzo and Roswaal were chatting and introducing themselves on the surface, Clind continued fighting AL-canica. Although Clind's thoughts are interesting in this part, I would like us to go back a little in time to tell you something curious. You see, I have the light novel on hand, so I know certain details that the web novel does not specify. Remember that the web novel is the draft of the story, and the light novel is the official canon. Why do I mention the differences between these adaptations right now? I mention this because in the web novel at this point, neither Roswaal nor Ezzo had met. Yes, they had heard of each other, but they had never spoken directly. What I just said is true for the web novel, but not for the light novel. There is a story exclusive to the work that came out in manga format on August 25th, 2017. In that manga, we saw how Ezzo attacked Roswaal's mansion during Arc 2, and it would be there where he would meet not only the Marquise, but also Subaru and company. In the light novel canon, when Subaru meets Ezzo again, they reference the event in the manga. But since the manga is not canon for the web novel, well, they act as if it were the first time they see each other. Well, in short, Ezzo and Roswaal's meeting and dialogue are different in the latest chapter of the light novel. But going back to Clind's thoughts, while the butler fights the traitor, he remembers his worldview about humans and how he finds them fascinating. This is something that was already mentioned in the last episode. But basically, Clind is fascinated by the potential that humans can awaken despite their fragility and weakness. It is never clearly stated, of course, but I imagine that this is a harsh and interesting clash of reality for Clind. In fact, he already had this fascination when he was the dragon of the nation. Whenever we see spirits or supernatural beings from Re-Zero on screen, they have a strange way of being, but a strange way only for us. And that is because we are beings with complex emotions, unlike the powerful beings in this universe who tend to be one-dimensional beings. It is not for nothing that the novel focuses on describing the entire personality of these entities with a single word, specifically with a sin. I imagine Clind finds how multi-dimensional normal human beings are fascinating, unlike the powerful being of the moment who is only driven by a single desire. And this is what would explain why he has that obsession with children or young souls, as he says. I know this sounds weird, but I must also say, as someone who has read all the novels, I can assure you that Clind has no bad intentions when he says he finds children fascinating because of the unlimited potential he sees in them in the future, and not for any other strange reason that you might be imagining. He thought all this about potential because right now he admires how the traitor has managed to compensate for his lack of control over the dragon with tactics that Clind simply would never have imagined employing. For example, it is said how Alcanica was constantly creating pillars of earth when confronting Clind and Roswaal. This is a combat approach that Volcanica had never considered doing in the past. There is also some lore about the dragon species, but it's not a big deal. They only tell us that they went beyond the Great Waterfall, and that's it. Although what is interesting is that in a non-canonical story set during Arc 2, Puck said that dragons came from beyond the Great Waterfall. It seems that Tepe was already subtly giving us spoilers about the origin of these creatures. I mentioned these details in my Spanish Iceberg 1 year ago. I hope I can translate this material for my English channel soon. This section then closes with Clind recalling the strategy to defeat Alcanica. They must pierce the dragon scales and dragon halo. The former is a type of aura that grants resistance to physical attacks, while the latter does the same with magical attacks. Once they pierce this, Clind will be able to hit the dragon's core. Now follows a long and complex conversation between Roswaal and Ezzo, Honestly, I have read the chapter about 4 to 5 times, and I still find it difficult to understand all the magical theories that the two strongest mages of the moment discuss. I will not tell you in detail what their conclusions were, but I will tell you what I think I understood. In any case, I would ask you to read this excerpt on your own for a better understanding of the matter. Previously, when talking about using 2 different elemental magics at the same time in Re-Zero, it was said that it was a task so complex that they describe it as a feat only capable of being done if you had 2 brains. Now imagine the skill needed to cast a spell that will require 6 elemental magics. Magics that do not exactly have to merge, but only have to be next to each other in the same spell. In this conversation between these geniuses, they discuss all the theoretical considerations to take into account for the feat. They talk about concepts such as the 2-attribute intersection theorem, tripedal centroid control, 5-fold resonance point, among other things. But upon finishing this discussion, both understand that if they follow certain rules and take risks, they can create a definitive magical light, which will have all the elements inside, and with this invoke a power so great that not even the traitor's dragon halo will be able to neutralize it. I think the most interesting details of this part are 2 things. First, while this conversation between the mages was happening, it is said that Kland watched this conversation out of the corner of his eye and couldn't help but smile and get excited. He reacted this way because seeing the 2 mages try to go beyond their limits reinforces once again his concept of the potential of young souls. He even admits that he feels fascination for Roswaal. After all, Kland knows that Roswaal, even with how obsessed he is, has spent 400 years striving for his goals. And while we all agree that Roswaal is crazy, that 400 years of dedication is still somewhat admirable. In turn, it is said that this fascination and admiration that Kland professes for humans is so great that it serves as a strength for him to avoid being consumed by the factor of melancholy. The other detail that caught my attention is that among the theories mentioned by the mages, Roswaal discovers that a theory Ezzo contributed was something the young mage developed based on the research of Roswaal J. Mathers, his grandmother. When the current Roswaal asks him where he got that theory, Ezzo tells him he found it on a dusty bookshelf at a street stall. I think I can answer how Ezzo possibly got the book. In the times when Roswaal J. Mathers was alive, she lived near the capital because of the constant war between the kingdom and the demi-humans. I even remember how it is said that near the slums of Lugunica, she had a warehouse where she kept things. In fact, that is where Roswaal, Marcus, and Russell would eventually form their first alliance. In that same novel, it was said that Kland would periodically go to clean and organize that place. I imagine that in the time when he wasn't going, some thief from that area stole Roswaal Julia's writings and then sold them to some street vendor without being aware of the theoretical value of those papers. Sometime later, Ezzo would arrive and buy it. But remember, this is just a possible explanation. After the theoretical discussion comes a moment that truly fascinated me. This is where Roswaal and Ezzo cooperate and manage to show us a glimpse of the things they can achieve if they join forces. While it is undeniable that Roswaal is more skilled than Ezzo, it is also true that the more empathetic and perceptive is Ezzo. While the current Roswaal focuses on seeing how much damage he can do compared to his ally, Ezzo thinks about how he can use his magic to amplify not only his damage, but also the power of his allies. In fact, Ezzo says a great phrase. He says that instead of adding your efforts and those of your allies, you should actually aim to multiply both variables instead of just a simple additive operation. Immediately afterwards, he creates a platform of debris in the air. This platform begins to be used by Kland, who uses it to mobilize and thus deliver more accurate blows against the traitor. Alcanica recognized this disadvantage and, while conjuring some magical lightning from his mouth toward the surface to take care of the mage who was doing this, he momentarily lowered his guard, and this was taken advantage of by his rival, who struck him on the jaw. At that moment, part of the spell exploded in his mouth, but another part was going straight towards Ezzo and Roswaal. So Roswaal decides that it is better to detonate that magic in the air than to detonate it near them. Instantly, he rewrites Ezzo's debris magic and begins to compress all the mana surrounding the dragon's area. This act caused Alcanica's magic to end prematurely, consequently forming large explosions in the sky. Ezzo, foreseeing what would happen, and reluctantly, managed to create a defensive field around his ally Kland, helping him avoid a fatal blow. He complains to Roswaal, but the latter only tells him that, following his logic of trusting others, he did this technique because he knew he would cover the consequences. Immediately afterward, he requests his cooperation to develop and create the birth of a new magic. But before continuing, allow me to share a little about Ezzo's life and thoughts.
In the midst of constructing a technique, Ezzo was on the verge of shedding tears in spite of himself.
Stupid. These foolish lacrimal glands. Cease your operation now. Just slack off.
Reprimanding the functions of his own body, he stiffened his cheeks to hold back the tears. Ezzo despised slacking off. This was because the dwarf race was not endowed with outstanding physical abilities or gaits, and many of his brethren were required to put in much more strenuous effort than other races in order to accomplish their goals. The sole grace of the dwarf race was that they had a tendency to be bestowed divine protections. But unlike his fellow member of the Felt camp, Camberley, Ezzo had also lost out on that lottery and was easily identifiable as a have-not. Ezzo despised slacking off. This was because he was forced to live under stricter conditions than most others. It was not. To use his dwarven ancestry as an excuse and hold it in contempt, saying, it can't be helped, was quite frankly unbearable to him. If Ezzo failed to reach the goals he set for himself, it would not be because he was a dwarf. If one allowed themselves to make an excuse even once in their life, they would fall into the trap of sloth and neglect in the blink of an eye, setting themselves up to live in a slackened and unproductive, spoiled manner. Ezzo knew this well. Rather, that had been the case for his elder brothers and sisters. Ezzo was the youngest child of 10 siblings, and all of his other siblings had received divine protections, rejoicing in the lives they lived fully dependent upon them. He would not say it was a bad thing. Those were the lives of his elder brothers and sisters. He wanted to say it was bad, but he would not. He could bear it. Merely, he could not bear to allow that for his own life. Hence, when AL-canica discovered a book of magic covered in dust stored deep within a box at a street vendor, he vowed to dedicate his life to the deep inspiration it gave him, and to never make excuses no matter what.
You're the same, Roswal. I can tell by looking at you.
While he occupied the seat of the kingdom's magician of the court and had multiple coloured titles under his belt for having mastered certain magical attributes to their extremes, Roswal did not provide guidance, nor did he ever consort with others. Even if he was skilled as a margrave, his position as a magician had been something bought through his parentage and political strength. Having doubted Roswal in such a manner, thus seeking to challenge him, was the unforgettable dark past of Ezzo. But, in reality, upon witnessing the efficiency of construction, in the magic Roswal was deploying, and the beauty of the techniques he was materializing, Ezzo felt ashamed from the bottom of his heart. Ezzo and Roswal were of the same generation, and Ezzo had conceitedly believed that among those in similar age to him, there were none who had endeavoured as much as he had, having devoted the entirety of the time he had lived. He had believed he had touched upon part of just what magic exactly was, but that was not the case at all. Between Roswal and Ezzo, in both their research and devotion to their studies of magic, it almost seemed as if there existed a difference of over 100 years. A difference in talents, a difference in race, a difference in births. No, it wasn't because of any of that. He would not credit it to any such thing. It was an absolute truth. Hence, AL-canica was on the verge of spilling tears of joy.
There was someone who was like that.
That there was someone who had endeavoured even more than him, standing in the realm he longed for. He was glad. Understanding, reverence, and gratitude all pounded through Ezzo's heart, causing him, who hated slacking off more than anything, to command his lacrimal glands to slacken for the first time in his life. With such sentiments in his chest, Ezzo once more focused his attention on demonstrating all the studies he had accreted. When it came to magic, it was required to firmly envision the result that would occur. Thus, it was tantamount to an act that would lay everything bare about a person, what they thought, what they desired, and what they wished for. Hence, there were no lies in magic. By witnessing someone's magic, everything about that person could be understood.
I personally really like the differences between Roswal's and Ezzo's lives. While Roswal is a talented mage today, it's undeniable that when he started on the path of magic, he had birth conditions that hindered his development. Basically, he had a start somewhat similar to Ezzo's. Of course, he would eventually abuse certain unethical magical mechanics to be born with a more suitable body. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he had to study and explore the unknown world of magic on his own to achieve that. Can we truly say that Roswal is someone who was given everything from that perspective? Although it is a difficult question to answer, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, he had a similar start to Ezzo. Ezzo doesn't know this, of course, but he still senses and recognizes that Roswal is traveling this same path of superhuman effort. And although Roswal unfortunately has a few hundred years head start, Ezzo visualizes that he will eventually catch up. But as incredible as this sounds, Roswal L. Mathers is not the first Mathers whom Ezzo admired. What I will say now is not confirmed. It is just my assumption, but But Ezzo improved his magic thanks to the research of Roswell J. Mathers, someone who, despite not being able to cast spells, still became a renowned researcher in the magical field. I am completely sure that Ezzo found out about her poor magical aptitude, and this made him admire her. So influenced by her, he strived for his goals, and later, this admiration was reinforced when he met the current Roswell. But enough about Ezzo's admiration. Returning to the story, at this point, the narration indicates how Roswell and Ezzo synchronize their minds in order to create a connection strong enough to invoke an elemental magic that contains the 6 magical elements of the Re-Zero world. Now that both were experiencing how the other used magic, they instinctively understood each other. Furthermore, Ezzo adds that he is aware that Roswell holds the magic titles of Red, Green, and Yellow, which are titles given to a single person who has mastered certain elements. Ezzo adds that Felix holds the blue color, and for now, only the white and black colors remain vacant. He then tells Roswell that his other nickname is Ezzo the Gray, and after telling him this, he asks, "Do you know which colors merge to get gray?" Ezzo only concludes this moment by saying that no matter how far he ventures down this solitary path of magic, he will eventually reach him. We return to the present. Now we see how, while the fight between Alcanica and Clind is taking place, it is said that a light composed of 6 elements in perfect synchronization appears from the skies. They are not fused. That light simply carries those 6 elements within it. It is said how this flash painted the colorless sky with various colors, which had lost its color as a result of the clashes of power between the dragonkin and its former shell. The projection of this light was so great that it is said that even when you saw its projection in the sky, you still did not see its end. And it is said that for a moment, this phenomenon rewrote the rules of reality, of the skies, and the earth. This was to be expected because this was a spell that not even the original mage Mayan or Echidna could achieve, since they founded the basis of magic. Seeing his imminent end approaching, the dragon launches a blast of flames, but he does not launch it towards the attack that was coming for him, or at Clind, or at the mages who made this possible, but rather launches it towards a distant place that was beyond the horizon. It is said that when this magic impacted the creature, it used the resistance that the dragon put up as fuel to amplify its effect. And once the dragon halo was broken by this spell, that is when Clind entered, and taking advantage of an old wound on its former body, he managed to strike this blind spot, breaking the dragon scales. Now that the dragon's natural protections fell, the force of the blow and the power of the magic managed to create an impact that resonated throughout Alcanica's body and reached its core, the dragon's heartstone. As the dragon falls, he regrets having come to this despite the advantage he had, and complains that he cannot blame the stars. Alcanica has been defeated. Although the web novel ends here, the light novel still has an extra section where it adds certain details, including a conversation between Roswell, Ezzo, and Clind. It is said that Ezzo collapses due to exhaustion, and Roswell was also about to collapse on top of him, but Clind arrives in time to prevent the Marquis from crushing the dwarf. They chat and reveal that the reason both of them were able to withstand the mind merging was because they already had mental fortitude. Roswell has it because he is Roswell, and Ezzo managed to improve that side of himself with the books of death he read at the beginning of the arc. But the celebration is interrupted when Clind says that even though they have fulfilled the role they were assigned, something was outside of their plans, so they look in a direction far beyond the horizon. Before moving on to the final conclusions, I would like to comment on a few things. I was honestly surprised by how Teppei was able to camouflage a relevant scene as something comical. I am talking about one of the first illustrations in this arc. In that part of the story, it was indicated how Ezzo was reading some books of death, and although it was difficult for him at first, he eventually managed to progress in this to the point where he managed to reduce the mental burden he was experiencing. Who would have thought that this would ultimately prepare him to perform the definitive spell I just narrated to you? Second, when Roswell and Ezzo talk after defeating Al-canica, Roswell comments on something interesting and says a line from a future that Emilia saw in the second season. In reality, about 2 or 3 lines have already come true, but if you are curious about what he tells her, I will reproduce the dialogue.
ただ気づいただけだよ。これまでの日々、一人で歩いてきたわけじゃなかったということに。
The part about him not walking alone is obviously said in relation to the determination that Ezzo showed him regarding the decision to sacrifice everything possible for magic. Of course, while Roswell sacrifices his friends or family for this, Ezzo walks the path of magic but avoids those sacrifices. I would like to comment more on my expectations for the other dialogues that have yet to be fulfilled, but this is neither the topic nor the time for this. The third and final thing I wanted to comment on was Alcanica's last move before being defeated. Do you remember that he only aimed towards the horizon and did not respond to his nearby enemies? Well, the epilogue reveals where he aimed. Before his final move, he had two options: either counterattack and defeat his enemies, or fulfill the role he had been assigned. So he decided to attack a place that was beyond the horizon. He attacked the Grand Mughalade Geyser. It is said that he launched a great breath which impacted this place, and the reaction that occurred was that all the water in the area flew hundreds of meters into the air, causing a sudden rain in the area, and after this phenomenon ended, it is said that a large cavern could be seen in that place. And here come the problems. You see, when the trusted leaker commented on this, he described it by saying that this site apparently led to another world. Only this phrase, "leads to another world," made many people formulate theories like, Subaru will return to his original world, or things like that. Even I came to consider that. So you can imagine my surprise when I went eagerly to read this part of the light novel. And I do not feel that the description I found indicates that. I think it was just an exaggerated description. I'm going to take a risk and share this small excerpt from the light novel. I no longer care if Kadokawa takes down my channel, but I want you to read this with me and tell me if what the bot is about to read truly implies that at the bottom of this cavern there is a new world.
When that fountain ceased, a brand new cavern would be bored into the land. That was a great cavern of a scale inconceivable on the surface. And when the mouth of that abyss opened up beyond the light and vapor, awaiting beyond would be a sky differing to the one present above.
That's it. Honestly, from what can be read, it seems more like the text is trying to tell us that this area is different due to the sudden disappearance of the geyser, and that is why that air pocket was formed, which is really just a hole caused by Alcanica's attack. I know I could be wrong, and if I am, it doesn't matter, because the beautiful thing about following the work week by week is charting these possibilities along the way. But I personally expected a more interdimensional description, and not one that simply seems to indicate geological differences. But for now, the canonical option the novel is going with is that the dragon's attack made a hole so big that we are now seeing what is beyond the Great Waterfall. In case you didn't know, the world of ReZero is a flat world which is surrounded by a great waterfall, and so far no one knows what is at its base. We know that Aldebaran plans to throw Subaru into that place. Could it be that we will soon see what is below now that we know the geyser is connected to the Great Waterfall? Or could it be that what is underneath is Subaru's original world? Anyway, that's all for today's video. With this, volume 42 of the novel is definitely closed, but I have thought about making a video generally covering and commenting on the most important events of this volume. You know, things like Petra's sacrifices, the combat of Gluttony versus Petra, the Black Serpent versus Amelia's camp, or Rem and Amelia versus Aldebaran. For this video, I'm going to set a goal. Don't worry, not an economic goal, but an interaction goal. If you are interested in this idea, show me that you want the video I just announced. For that, I will ask for 1,000 likes and 300 comments. I know 1,000 likes seems like too much, but in my last video, I reached 900 without asking, so I don't think I'm asking for anything truly excessive. I also inform you that I have already uploaded 4 chapters of the Cut Content series, 4 in Spanish and 4 in English. So if you don't want to wait until December to watch it, consider becoming a member of the channel and supporting me to continue this project. Oh, and also to continue funding the animation project for each character in the novel. You have already seen some of them in this video, but I still have more to use and will use them soon in my videos and shorts. Remember that from now on, I will make a video in this style for every new chapter of the novel. But tell me, what did you think of the closing chapter of this last volume?